Howdy. Thanks for listening to Let the Movie Speak. Before we get started, we'd like to ask a favor of you.
It's a simple favor. If you could just rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen, that might help other ears get into our ecosystem here and hear another episode. Anyway, enjoy the show.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Sing, sing, sing went my heartstrings as we started for Huntington Dell.
Let the movie speak.
You heard it from the mouth of our backstage David Lynch impersonator. This is Let the Movie Speak, a movie podcast where we attempt to do just that. This is our third season, and we're working our way through movies of the 40s. My name is Travis.
I'm Justin.
Justin, how are you doing, buddy?
Well, thank you for asking. First of all, Travis, we must engage in pleasantries.
Yes.
I'm doing pretty good, and before I return that question in your lane, like a well-funded and calibrated air-to-missile defense system, I just want to let everyone know that I don't know about this movie, what we're doing today, folks. And by that I mean usually, we hit like an hour. I guess some of our episodes go a bit over that, like Gone with the Wind. But anyway, I don't really know. We're gonna get there with this one today.
Yeah, it's 2 hours somehow. Let's just say somehow. Yeah, and I don't know. It doesn't like feel like ultra long. I mean, I guess there are moments where it definitely does.
I did check my watch a few times.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel. I've watched longer feeling 2 hour movies, but it's about the journey, not the destination sometimes. And
wow.
Yeah. In this case, I don't even know.
So it's my fault, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. I agree. I think this will be an interesting conversation, but not because we have to like leave things out. Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Good buddy, good pal. And I think before we get into Meet Me in St. Louis from 1944 and the way that it sort of ignores the World War II trappings in an interesting way. It's a period piece, so it is what it is. Before we get into how it fits into our 40s series, into that decade, let's tell people about what we watched this week. How's that sound?
Time travel, go.
All right, man. I'm going to let you kick it off. What'd you watch this week?
Oh, thanks, brother.
You're welcome.
Well, before I talk about what I watched, I would like to just mention something that my children watched, and something that we can kind of maybe relate about and discuss maybe how traumatic our own childhoods were. So I don't know how it came up, but my wife and I, talk about this, that, and the other thing because, well, we are married. And in the presence of our children one time, Power Rangers were somehow mentioned. I don't know if Power Rangers are still a thing, on TV or toys or whatever. I imagine they probably are.
Yeah, there's still like new episodes. I think they go straight to Netflix or something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're a little bit more in the know than I am. But so all I could remember was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers from, 1995 or whatever. Which I thought was pretty radical when I was younger. And so my kids are like, Power Rangers, what is that? And so I told my wife, maybe we should just like show them a clip of it or something and see because I really didn't remember, dude. I remembered I had an action figure of the Green Ranger.
Oh yeah.
And I really wanted to go see the movie in the theater, but my parents were like, nah. and I didn't get why then, but I think after watching some footage, I get it now.
Yeah.
I watched this compilation that is not. You can find this on YouTube, folks, and it's put out like by the official Power Rangers channel. Comments are turned off, which is often a bad sign.
Yep.
And it's not a good sign in this case. That was an insane show.
It's crazy.
So I mean, like they were like, hey, what are they doing in Japan? Well, they're doing this really wacky stuff on TV. And the Power Rangers people were like, I don't think so. We're going to way up the ante on them. And so you just get this like, dude, it was hard. My kids had so many questions. And often the answer is like, I don't know. Why did the Green Ranger play his sword like a flute and move his giant robot friend by doing that?
Not a clue.
I don't know. Magic, I guess. And it's just like it's so intentionally like campy is not the right word. That's too soft for what's going on here. I mean, it's, like they get into their, I don't even remember what these things are called, dude, but they're big robot mecha fighting things.
They all turn into a big robot thing.
Monster. Yeah. Yeah, and so they get in there and they're like all in the control booth or whatever together and like, what are we gonna do? Well, we gotta blast this guy to oblivion. Let's see what this baby can do, Billy. And it's like, what director was like, here's what we need, guys, okay? I need you to put that Hamlet stuff aside. I need you to go deeper. I need you to go more primal. I don't know how this stuff got made, man, but it's bonkers. And so I feel like, as someone that watched Power Rangers in our youth, as people that watched it then, I don't know how that's affected us, but I guess I kind of blocked it out of my memory because none of that was really ringing real familiar.
Yeah.
With me.
Nostalgia is a strange filter,
Indeed it is, and that does bear true, I think, for the movie that we'll discuss today, Meet Me in St. Louis.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I'll just quickly then, since I've taken up some time talking about the crazy Let's Morph gang. I finished Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Our resident Marvel operative. What did you think, my friend?
Yeah. Well, kind of like you at the end of Justice League, it's like I gotta be done, and so but to be completely fair, it's a bit of a mixed bag in a good way, meaning that there is some legitimately good stuff.
Yeah.
Without going through all of what's bad and what's good, I think the big picture stuff, what worked in the beginning still works at the end.
Yeah.
Every time this show goes personal, just like WandaVision, every time this show goes personal, every time it's human, and we're getting to know why characters are doing something, it's phenomenal. And I don't mean that word lightly. It's not like, oh, that's okay. It's like, where else do we see race talked about in such an even-handed manner?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the high octane like The People versus O.J. Simpson, which is a completely different story, and that's fine. I really enjoyed that series too. But it's just, man, even people that like are villains in this show, they're like not, because you get to know them as people, which is just so great, man. So people are three-dimensional. The guy that like is going to be the new Captain America, he ends up doing some badness, and but you still kind of like get him. It's like, I kind of understand why this guy did that. I have a hard time feeling like this guy's just, this is, they don't make a Thanos out of anybody.
Right.
They don't make a generic Marvel villain out of anyone. And this lady that's leading like this so-called terrorist organization, she's making wrong choices, right? And you as the audience, like, there's no ambiguity about that. But because you know her and you get your background a little bit from the way that the story has been set up, it's like, well, I get it. Yeah, you still don't murder people, but I understand why that character is making those decisions. So that part is really refreshing and, kind of unique, even for Marvel world, and really fun. Oh, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus has a part now in the Marvel universe, and that really rocks.
She rocks.
Yeah. Oh man, she does big time. And so and I think that they really brought her in to be like, in her kind of comedic element, which is really it's somewhere between Elaine and her character on Veep.
Yeah.
It's like it's great, man.
Is she also an evil witch?
That I didn't know.
I'm asking. Is she also an evil witch?
I thought you were instructing me, teacher.
She's also an evil witch. You got to hear the backstage stories.
She does not. She plays a government official, essentially.
Okay, I like that.
For the U.S. government, and so when that show chooses to really lean into its comedic elements, more often than not, it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, oh, that was a really corny line, that didn't work. It just feels good, man. It just feels like fun. Like, oh man, this is popcorn TV. And it's good. But then you also have the very last episode in the end credits, they change it from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier to Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which is a little confusing because we already had a movie called that.
Right.
But be that as it may, so the Falcon takes on the mantle at the end. And when that happens, there's just like, because he's like, now, because it's Marvel Cinema, he has a Captain America suit that flies like the Falcon did. And it's like, what? But now he's also got the shield. And so it's it's, as you can imagine, the sequences that involve that are just like mind-numbingly, like Power Rangers is way more fun to watch. Okay, when you're talking about like action, because at least those are people and people in rubber suits doing ridiculous stuff. This is just like the stuff that they try to make look cool. I just don't get how these shows exist in the same planet. I don't get how we can have a show where an elderly-ish African-American guy says, you're never going to succeed. You should understand, as a black man that grew up in America, you can never be Captain America. How does that exist in the same universe where Captain America throws a shield out the window and then does like a somersault and catches it 4 stories below?
Right.
And it's just so painfully all CGI that it's like, oh man. So it's a mixed bag. Like I said, thankfully the human elements, I think, I don't know. I was going to say they outweigh the CGI stuff, but it might be kind of an even match. So
interesting.
I can't give it a hard recommend, but I can definitely give it a recommend for, honestly, if you skipped all the action scenes in this series in every episode, I don't think you'd be missing much at all for the most part. Especially stuff that's not personal, like people fighting on the ground, fists to cuffs, that tends to be a little more human. But flying through the air and no, I've had enough.
Yeah,
I've had enough. That's what I have to say. And thankfully, it's over. So that'll be it for now, sir. So please tell me you watched something that's not superhero related to save us.
I, in fact, did not watch anything superhero related.
Saints be praised.
Indeed. Yeah. I went to the movies, huzzah, and saw what, actually, when I went into this, I didn't know anything about this movie. It was not King Kong versus Godzilla. It was not Nobody, which I'd already seen. And it's just such slim pickings that it was the one that was like, okay, that sounds kind of like an interesting drama. I'll see it. And it's called Minari. And come to find out, this is like a big Oscar movie. After I went and saw it, I looked up stuff about it. And this is a period drama from the 1980s about a Korean family who immigrates to the United States and tries to make their way, essentially tries to, live the American dream or whatever. And so it takes place like in Reagan's America, around a post-Korean War America, and it really is just like about a family. It really centers around a husband and wife, but it does do other characters justice in a big way. The kids, the grandmother, a couple side characters are really important and impactful. All that to say, man, I won't go into spoiler territory because it's still kind of a new movie, and I don't want to spoil really good stuff that's kind of new. This movie is awesome. It was so good. And those are all critically brilliant sentences I just put together. Just to say, it's a simple story. It is really well written and acted beautifully. It's shot like in I don't love to use this term, but it's sort of like a Terrence Malick-y kind of just nice
Oh,
photography.
never heard that before.
Yeah, nice photography of things that are beautiful to look at, but in this case, they really do matter to what's going on in the script as well. So it's not just like, hey, look at these beautiful, flashy shots we've threw into this story of trees and stuff. Like this stuff actually matters. Yeah, man, it was super affecting and moving, and it's also just like for me anyway. I'm not like super versed in Korean films, and having seen Parasite and how awesome that was, and recognized as such, rightly so, and then now this, it's just a huge breath of fresh air to me as a person who doesn't have enough exposure, partly because of my own, lack of searching that out, and partly because we're in a really cool time where foreign films and domestic films, from an American's perspective, they're really kind of they're being held in equal weight more and more, and recognition is becoming faster. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need 10 years to realize, like, holy cow, this movie that was made in an Asian country, or an African country, or in the Middle East somewhere, or whatever, is like, this is like an incredible piece of cinema.
Well, isn't it great that cinema has really experienced a large amount of democratization?
Yeah.
So now we're using this. We're able to do a podcast
Yes.
essentially because the technology exists, where we can make it, whether or not you like what we're saying or you think we're a couple of idiots, that's fine. We at least, we can make a production value that sounds like, oh, okay, well, I can listen to that and not be like, did these guys make it in their basement?
Right.
The answer is yes. Okay, but that's not the point.
It's not the point.
So yeah, I think it's great, man, that now that with camera technology and audio technology just being more and more refined, that there's no it's not at all second tier, and not that it really, I mean, in some ways it kind of was. Like, if you're in a poor country, you don't have access to these things, no one was going to be able to film in Technicolor, in like 1938 Japan,
right?
It just wasn't going to happen. So I agree with you, man, and that does make me excited for not only to see Minari, because I was really hoping to see that while it was in theaters, but just for going forward as we start to explore other decades, other genres and things. There's a whole world of cinema out there, and I think we'll see that most poignantly as we go through actual decades. But I think it's going to be harder and harder to keep out. Not that we're trying to, but just like, if we're going to have about 10 films from a decade, man, there's so much good stuff, especially once you hit the late 50s and 60s. It's like the world's your oyster, and there's so much good stuff that I haven't seen either, but I'm really excited to see and hope we get the chance to talk about.
Yeah, and I think, our best strength, and I think if you're, listening along, whether this is the one episode you listen to, or you listen to a bunch, or you keep it up every week, our best strength as, takers in of this stuff is just open-mindedness. You know what I mean? We're pretty open to any level of movie, any where did it come from, what was the budget, what was it shooting for. I think you're so well served as a watcher of film to have some discernment, and don't just watch all bottom of the barrel trash and melt your brain cells. I mean, there's a time and a place for that here and there. But yeah, the open-mindedness, I think, has served us well and will continue to serve us well. And on that same note, Justin, the democratization of the medium has certainly taken a big leap forward in the last, especially 20, 30 years, probably. And some of that is technology and access, and some of it is the studio landscape changing, right? When you don't have massive studios are really the only way in, and there's sort of monopolies kind of set up. There's always been small studios, right? But now with streaming being a thing, and so many platforms that have real recognition and notoriety and some legitimacy, these movies could go in theaters. Most of them get some kind of limited release. Some of them just go to Sundance or whatever. And then once they get nominated for an Oscar, it's well, we're going to release this now for a little while, even if it is just art film release, not Avengers Endgame level nonsense. But Yeah, Minari is one of those movies that I can't imagine many people watching it and walking away and being like, that sucked. Like, I honestly think there's something there for everybody. You know what I mean? It doesn't, it says stuff about like the dynamic between a husband and wife when there's tension, you know, economically, and when there's, you know, the man really feels his duty to like provide for his family, and the woman wants to be supportive, but like she also has, you know, feelings and a brain and agency. And so there's just this great real tension there, but it's also not one of those movies that like makes you want to go jump off a bridge, you know. It just feels,
That's nice.
It feels real. And it also explores, I think, from one of the most interesting angles that I've seen in some time, just this idea of like faith, and faith from an American, you know, centric perspective. It's not a movie about that, but it deals with that in every way that it needs to. Every time it reaches that crossroads in the story, it doesn't you know, kind of fluff it off and not handle it. It really grabs on in the ways that it can, and it attempts to ask some really interesting questions. So definitely strong recommend for Minari. For me, it's like, you know, on Letterboxd, it's 5 out of 5 stars. Like, this is a pretty perfect movie, and I can't really give any nicer, higher praises other than to say it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and it got nominated for Oscars, so it must be good, right? Anyway, that's what we watched this week, and I think it's time we board the trolley. Justin, what do you say?
Yeah, now that we've talked about how multicultural and wonderful cinema can be, let's talk about Meet Me in St. Louis. So yeah, ding-a-ling, let's get on the trolley.
Now that you mention that, this is like the whitest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, which is, you know, like it takes place in 1903/4 in St. Louis. I mean, you know, if we expect this to be like about the plight of any minority group in St. Louis in the early 1900s, no. Judy Garland was not in that movie.
Yeah.
She was in a movie called Meet Me in St. Louis, which came out in 1944. And I mean, like we said, man, this is just a fluffy movie. There's not a lot here. There's no meat. You're talking about a Minari. There's tension between husband and wife. There's a little bit of that for like a couple minutes in
That's
this movie.
the only thing that actually grabbed me was the father and
Same here.
and wife. Yeah. So I mean, like, if we had, like you're saying, it's a hard movie to like plot summarize, because man, the plot is just like Jell-O that's been sitting out on the counter for like 3 weeks. It's just kind of like
Yeah, it's gonna smell.
It's gonna smell. Like we said, it's gonna smell. So get your sniffers ready, folks. If you had to break it down, I suppose the IMDb, you know, log line might help, which is young love and childish fears highlight a year in the life of a turn of the century family. And I think,
Okay.
yeah, but
Is that even fair? I mean, yes, that is. I'm not trying to say like actually it's about, you know, astronauts, but it's like, yes, those things are in there, but I think that listeners, do yourself a favor and go watch this movie and then compare what you thought you saw to that log line.
Yeah.
I think that shows it doesn't have a plot, frankly.
I think that's someone trying really hard to put it into words. What is this movie about, right? And then they're like, I don't know, young love and childish fears highlight a year and whatever. So I think the year in the life thing is the best part of that. And pre-recording, I mentioned this to you, but I think that the closest thing that I can relate this to, like in a storytelling way, is if you've ever read Little House on the Prairie, right? Like, and I'm reading that with my kids right now. At least we're finishing the first book, and Little House on the Prairie is like, you know, a series of books. And at least from the first book, Justin, and I think you can speak to the rest if this is not true of the rest of the story. But like the first book, especially, it really just exists as like these are vignettes, right? These are vignettes of a certain time and a certain place and a certain way of life. It's not really designed to give you this giant A to Z overarching, like characters went from here to there and look how they were changed. It's like, no, this is how we used to make hats. This is how we used to find our food. This is how we used to stay alive, yada, yada, yada. And this is a time, right, that is not nearly as cutthroat and compelling as that, right? Like, 1903, 4 in St. Louis is not the frontier land of Little House on the Prairie. But every scene in this movie is, a really simple setup and knock down the pins of like, well, in this scene, this happens, and it's 3 words long. It's just so little is there, right?
Well, and I think in the so I've read or listened on audiobook many times to all of those Laura Ingalls Wilder stories.
Yeah,
and I think I get your point, and I think you're right to an extent. But I think the difference is with the Little House on the Prairie series, that follows Laura from her time as a baby, essentially, Little House in the Big Woods, or her future husband Almanzo in Farmer Boy, growing up in upstate New York, all the way up until they get married, and they have their own life together. So you do what those books do, and why I think even though they largely are vignettes and they're not really polemic at all, which is fine. Not everything has to be, like you said. But they do, like the end result is like you have, through X amount of those stories, you've gotten to know those characters enough so that, you do know Laura's pa at the end. And, it does mean something, how they, are take each other's hands in marriage. So you don't be in Meet Me in St. Louis, on the other hand, I mean, we get so little, man, because it's so much more concerned about being a musical.
Yeah. And it's also like a year. It's like reading the first book and just putting them down and never reading the second one, right? It is 1 year in the life of these people. But you were going to say it's a musical. And let's talk about that. What kind of musical is this? Because we've seen 42nd Street, which, maybe not a perfect movie, but man, it had like boatloads to say about show business and people. Right. And what about this one?
It has very little to say. So, I mean, kind of under the surface, there's like this romantic sort of story about, these two sisters trying to find love and these different suitors of theirs. And, will the family move from St. Louis to New York?
Yeah.
That's kind of another issue. But really, it's not. Yes, those things exist, and sometimes they sort of drive what's going on. But often, I think you made some kind of observation, again, off mic before we started, that like it's just concerned with like, hey, let's put these people in this spot so they can sing this number or dance this routine and wear these outfits. And I think that is where we get World War II's influence, right?
Yeah.
It's 1944. If you're sitting down in the movie theater and watching this, it's a pretty dark freaking year for America in the war. That's the year I think we lost more than any other year that we were involved in that conflict. And so you have this drama and trauma, and just reality sucks in 1944. And there's not really a clear end in sight until later in the year. And so to watch this, I think, is to recognize and not just watch, right? This was a huge hit. This was a financial powerhouse for the studio when this came out. And so I think that shows that, why this is so successful, in my opinion, is because nobody wants to think about 1944 and 1944 when they're going to the cinema if they don't have to. So take me back to St. Louis in 1904 or 03. There was not even World War I then. That's right. That's when my grandparents were growing up, or my dad was a kid. And boy, doesn't that sound nice? Look at those. So it's just very light movie. It's not that it tries to say nothing, but it doesn't try to say anything too hard. I think because reality is hard enough for 1944 America.
Definitely some escapism going on here. And I think if you were to look at all the films of 1944, 45, there's probably a lot of that, And so this isn't, it's not unique in that way. And the music of the time, same thing, right? Like the pop music was like just utter nonsense, because it was like, we don't want to think, we just want to bop, or whatever. Like it's not, and I kind of get it. You know what I mean? Like, we're not in World War II by any means, but like after a year of, worldwide pandemic, stuff, it's like, I get why people went to the theater to watch King Kong versus Godzilla and were cheering for the ape. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like there's something about like total escapism and not really thinking that it not just has like, you can make sense of it, but it probably has some inherent value. You know what I mean? Like to just like,
I agree,
like fall into a story and the person at the center of this story, I think, is really the big ticket item. You know what I mean? There's lots of characters who get plenty to do on the sliding scale that this movie gives anyone to do. But, Judy Garland, right? Biggest face on the poster, biggest name on the marquee. And, she was at the kind of pinnacle of her stardom from stage and now screen here, because this was not a stage musical adapted for the screen. This was a screen musical, and it shows, right? Like it's clearly designed for the camera. It's the costumes and the photography and everything. They're like, that's the best part of the movie, honestly. Like it looks great.
Yeah.
The costumes are like really intricate, and she changes every scene, and like it's, all that's, it's fine. It's fine. But like, how far can that really take you when what you're looking for is like, what story are you telling me? But Judy Garland, right? She is an incredible performer. Like her voice is fantastic. Yeah. She does so much to make dumb, fluffy, meaningless things kind of compelling at times. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's not really a song that she sings in this that I'm not tuned into, even if I'm recognizing like, this thing means nothing. You know what I mean? Like her first song that she sings is basically about like the boy next door. And it's this whole, you see this in musicals all the time, right? It's this like idea of the, starstruck woman in love with this beau. And it's just so incredibly, heightened and kind of ridiculous. There's just nothing there, other than what Judy Garland brings to the table.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the same goes really for every other character to an extent, because everyone really, you don't really get the impression that many of these people exist to like lure you in and to just, make you feel like, that's a real character. I got the impression more that, oh, that person is in service of this device for the script, And I don't think that's because I have some amazing insight. It's just very
obvious.
There's just not it. I guess the one exception to that would be Katie. They're like the family's cook or whatever.
Yeah.
I really bought what that lady was selling.
And the grandpa, to a lesser extent, maybe, like the maid and the grandpa sort of bring like kind of predictable comedic relief.
Right. And it's nothing against, like I think we mentioned, the acting in this movie is not the problem.
It's fine.
It's not like, it's all very serviceable or better than that. But, we do come to a point where the dad wants to take the whole family away from New York. And the whole family is like, what are you talking about? We grew up in St. Louis. We're going to die here. And but he's, father knows best, and it's 1903, so I think I'm going to do what I want. Which is, as close as we come to commentary for this movie.
Yeah.
You don't really ever get the feeling, though, that it's because they live in some really oppressive patriarchal society so much as just like...
He's kind of crotchety.
He's going to do what he wants to... Yeah, he's just like, that's just him. That guy exists in every age, unfortunately. That's not unique to America in 1903. So, but at the end, he decides, okay, he kind of sees the toll that it takes on his family and how much they like St. Louis, so he decides they're going to stay. And the one part of this movie where I really bought the acting and the drama was when the husband and the wife play and sing at the piano together, and at the very end when he says, no, we're not going to move, and the whole family is like unwrapping Christmas presents. and the actress that plays Mrs. Smith Senior, she just breaks down and cries.
She kills
and it's
it
so
there. Yeah.
freaking real for
Yeah.
a second, you know. I really bought that, and that was affecting.
Because in the first sequence you're talking about, right? Like he says, "We're moving to New York," and everybody goes, "But what about this? But what about that? But what about Grandpa?" You know what I mean? Like there's some real questions in there, and at first the wife is like, "You don't understand what this is going to do to us," and I, you know, she's kind of questioning, but then she makes a really quick turn and she plays the wife. You know, she brings him back his cake, she gives him a kiss, and she says, "If you think this is what's best, we'll do it." You know what I mean? She remains faithful, even though it's clear she doesn't think like this is a good decision. And then she just goes to the piano and she plays this "You and I" song. You know what I mean? And she draws him in and she sings this love song with him with no expression on her face. Like she's trying to tell him in the best way she can, like, I'm not going anywhere, but you need to really understand what you're doing and how, like, you know, maybe the strong arm approach in this case isn't, think about it, you know, or something like that. There's really something there. And they're both like ridiculously good. The people who play the women who play the piano in this movie, if you know anything about music and you're watching, they are playing the piano part, like for realsies. And so that's just cool. I mean, but their voices are good. And then, like you said, Justin, the contrast between those two moments is like, I wish the movie was just about the husband and wife. You know what I mean? Like, because Judy Garland's character, as well performed as it is, it's like, it's sort of like if you took The Sound of Music and you made it about, you know, one of the Von Trapp kids who like had kid issues or was like going through adolescence and just made it really surface level and never really scratched out. But like the Sound of Music is great because it's about Christopher Plummer's character and Julie Andrews, and they're adults and like they go from one place to another, and it's all against the backdrop of World War II as well. But it's like that story, like it goes, you know what I mean? And those performances anchor it, and you can see the potential for that here with the husband and wife. What is it? It'd be Leon Ames as Mr. Smith, and Mary Astor as Miss Anna Smith. Yeah, they really, other than when they give the dad just like, you know, kind of like repetitive kind of meanness, you know, it's like they set him up as just this crotchety, immovable man character, which is like, it's Rhett Butler. It is Christopher Plummer's character from Sound of Music that he just waits till the very end to do something. And then the rest of the movie's filled out by like siblings and potential lovers, right? Like, so like the siblings, let's talk about the siblings. The person who gets the most recognition or accolades even is Margaret O'Brien as Tootie, just the young girl. And I think this might be a good place to land for a moment, Justin. The character of Tootie is so weird. Like I can't really wrap my mind around it, other than to think that like the screenwriters and the director, everybody who was telling her how to do what she was doing and say what she was saying, that they must be thinking this whole time that there's sort of like I don't even know if this is a reference that makes sense, but like Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, like this kind of pesky, snarky but witty kid. But in this case, everything that she says is it's so like almost demented. She's like Wednesday Addams or something, and she says things that are like off the wall ridiculous, and I think we're meant as an audience to just go like, oh, that weird little girl. But how did you take that?
Man, this really is a weird movie. That's my thesis for this film. And I think the whole Tootie and just the kids in general in this movie are just, they say like, can you think of any 1940s movie where an adult says like, I'm gonna chop off your head and put it in the wood chipper? You know, that's like, we kind of waited for Fargo before we were saying stuff like that, you know? But in this movie, it's like the first scene where you see Tootie, she's like, where's my kitty? And, you know, the Katie or the mother, someone makes a joke like, oh, you know, I think she fell down the stairs and I kicked her down the stairs or something, you know, just kind of lightly joshing her in a very obvious way. And Tootie like kind of explodes like kids can. and says something like, you better not have, or I'm going to kill you. I'm going to snap you in half, and horses are going to draw and quarter you. Then we're going to burn your house down. Then we're going to hunt your family down. I mean, it's not quite to that extreme, but it is
Crazy.
That's like 80% true.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, and the family's just like, oh, that sounds scary.
And they just laugh at her. They're like, "Oh, Tootie," you know what I mean?
Right. And so Tootie
weird.
just continues to say stuff like that at every chance she gets. And it gets to the point where it's like, it's just head scratching. It's not so much morally offensive as it is just like, why? Why
Yeah.
is this kid, like, what? It just really didn't make sense in the dynamics of that family either, where like, dad threatens to spank a kid that, like left a roller skate on the steps or something.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me in that family where there's that kind of disciplinarianism, this kid that like literally talks about murder, like her dolls are always dead too. Like
She's buried her dolls in the backyard.
it's weird, man.
so weird.
It's not all fun and games. So
Speaking of things that don't make sense, let's talk about a couple things that don't make sense. Okay. The Halloween middle half hour of the movie,
don't know why it's in there.
it's so weird. And first of all, before we talk about how weird it is, there is some like cultural backdrop that makes it at least make a little more sense, right? Like Halloween at the turn of the
Sure.
century was not like trick or treat, give me some candy and have some community time with the neighborhood and, whatever. It was like, it was all tricks, and those tricks were freaking mean, and kids would like, be mean spirited and do pranks that were similar to what we see in the film, like just go throw flour on people and run away and call that killing them. And, like I read an article from Smithsonian.com or something about this, and it literally said that like kids had an anarchist streak that the media said like we need to fix the Halloween problem. You know what I mean? So this was like a real thing. But in the movie that is like so saccharine and like cotton candy, this comes out of nowhere. It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You cut to this Halloween sequence and the grandpa's like, here's your flower. Go have fun with the evil people outside. And then the kids are burning a giant, horrifying pile of furniture in the street. It's seriously like weird, like Children of the Corn level, like who's gonna go kill this neighbor? You gotta. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's not fun to watch, frankly. It was. I just kind of sat also puzzling over that. Like, what are we trying to accomplish by this whole section? And frankly, I don't really know, Travis, because at the end, there's this whole subplot of like Tootie has, they think she's like gotten run over by the trolley.
Yeah.
But no, really, she has this story about, how, well, look, I won't even mention with her cover story. We'll just go to because it's just a mess. But ultimately, it sounds like her and her friends have had this great idea of putting a dummy in the middle of the trolley path, hoping that it will make the trolley go off the rails
And kill people.
and then Judy Garland's character is like, what the heck? That's not right. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
And then 10 seconds later, her and her sister are just laughing about it. And it's like, what the, nothing is, this is not funny.
It's
like,
so weird. Yeah. It's so weird.
It's bizarre, man.
That part doesn't fit into this like fluffy movie of sequences in any way, shape, or form. I think if you just take that out, what's left over is like a bunch of tunes that are, they're fine, but none of these are showstoppers. There's a couple.
Except the last one.
Yeah. Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Yeah, I like this song.
It's a great song. And, there's a reason why it went on to be a hit completely separately from this movie. And everyone would cover it, right? Because, like, if you just take it as a song, it's got a really interesting, melancholy, like, way of approaching something that can oftentimes just be like, oh, by gosh, by golly, it's time for gingerbread and holly or whatever, But in the context of even this story, if you just give it something like they might have to move to New York, this might be their last Christmas there. They're looking at the snow family out on the lawn. She sings this song of like, just enjoy tomorrow. At least have that,
Yeah.
But it's kind of undercut by freaking Tootie going outside and slaughtering the snowman family like 2 seconds later.
Right, and her reasoning for that too, man, because I think like you could have saved it, because what I took that as was like, she's just upset, right? She doesn't want to leave. She's
Yeah.
just taking out her frustration, which is kind of true. But when her sister finds her and is like, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm killing them all. If I can't have them, no one can have them."
Yeah.
And it's like, why is this poor little girl being made just to be like this? I hope she grew up to be a little more normal, because man, that's a kind of a crazy character.
These are all red flags for a serial killer.
Right.
That's what they are. Yeah. So, yeah, Tootie's just so weird. Like, I don't even, like, there's not a single scene or line of dialogue that happens with her that I feel comfortable with. Every bit of it is a little unnerving.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight, before we get into our wrap up here and try to answer the question of whether this is worth our time or what's it saying, which I think we're just mushing it all together today because it's a tough one. I like the corset sequence with the two sisters. They're kind of like cranking down the corsets, which is, I think we've seen this in multiple movies, right? Like, this is a really interesting period correct cultural touchstone of like beauty and the perception of beauty then, and like something that you're literally like harming yourself in order to keep up those appearances, which is, we have our versions of those things today, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I want to just highlight Judy Garland again and just say, like, she does some great physical work in that scene where, like, after she cranks down the corset, the sister does, they're talking about the dance and, got to do anything we can to get our man tonight or whatever, which again, story fluff, blah, whatever. But Judy Garland does a lot of like nonverbals while the sister is talking that are really clever and fun. Like, she tries to put her elbow down on the chair and she's like, can't do it. And then she's like, kind of like she can't breathe. Like, and it's not like, oh my gosh, why would she do that to herself? You don't really come away with that feeling. You come away with it like she really, like, as an actor, like she really had all the talent to maximize this simple, almost Chaplin-esque setup of like, you're now in a straitjacket of sorts, and like, how can you make that kind of funny? And she does a lot with it. And if this movie does anything, it shows you that like Judy Garland was better than this. Her voice is great. Yeah. And she does things in moments like that where you're like, man, I wish you could be in something greater, and
absolutely.
And of course that alludes to, Judy Garland's trajectory as an actor, as a person, which is altogether tragic,
Right. No, I agree, man. It's hard to, if you know anything about the, history or legacy of Judy Garland, because there was even that biographical movie that came out about her a few years ago, at least from the time of when we're recording this.
Did you see that? The Renee Zellweger thing?
No, I didn't. Have you?
No, but she got really good, reviews and awards for it and stuff. She looks good in it. I mean,
I'll be honest, man, it does look really good. It's kind of the same for me, like the Jacqueline Kennedy movie with Natalie Portman. It's like, it's just going to be a bummer,
Yeah.
So
this is not going to end well. Like,
no, I'm not saying that it's like, I'll never watch it because I don't want to be sad. But it's one of those movies where you got to be. I don't like come home from work and it's like, boy, what do I want to watch? You know what? A really depressing biography, So you got to be in the right mindset.
Time and place,
yeah. But she's like dead not many years, 20 plus years after Meet Me in St. Louis, she's dead and buried. So she has Hollywood was not kind to her. She had a lot of there's this weird thing in Hollywood where there's like every movie she was in, it seemed like, at least when she was around this age, like had a problem with her appearance, which is like, Judy Garland just looks like a normal young woman. I don't know what we're so freaking upset about, but so there's this all like, this, can you just imagine being the star vehicle for a movie and being told like, you look a little funny, or, you're not quite good enough. How can we fix this? It's like, gosh, what the heck is that going to do to a person, And so she had a lot of substance abuse problems, some of which ended up killing her.
It really makes that corset scene hit a little differently, doesn't it? I mean,
right. The metaphor
I laugh
of
to
keep from crying.
Of a corset, right? Like, and she is in this freaking horrible device that people used to, suck in their waists to be like minimal. And what is she doing in that scene? She's acting her freaking butt off,
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's tragic.
It is, man. So that's kind of hopefully I haven't ruined that for anyone, because I imagine if you're watching this and you know anything about Judy Garland, you might already know that.
Sure.
But it's kind of hard in the same way we talked about, Jimmy Stewart pre-World War II. There's World War II again.
Yep.
For Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's hard to see her younger, or I mean, it's hard to see her at any age, frankly, dude. I think, like, even when she had that show on, what was it, CBS?
Yeah.
And there's some amazing songs that she sang on there. I'm thinking of Lost in the Stars. But it's just sad, man. Like, because that person ultimately, like, there's no happy ending, for a person that makes their living off of trying to show people like it can all be fine in the end. It's not for her at all, so I don't know how do we work ourselves out of this conversational bummer?
I will highlight two things. One is not nearly the same kind of bummer, but just the idea that, like, the romantic foil in this movie, played by Tom Drake, the neighbor Truett, is, like, treated like utter trash from a story perspective in so many ways, right? Like, you alluded to it earlier, but, like, Tootie's story when she falls and busts her lip when they're doing this horrible trolley thing is like, oh, John Truett tried to kill me. It's just it's insane. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, and all it does is, like, set up this kiss, which could have happened any number of ways. His character's such a cardboard box, not because of him, just because the script gives him nothing. So I don't even know that there's anything more to comment on that. He just doesn't. He has nothing to do. He has no arc. He's just a dude, who sometimes has a suit.
Because even at the end, the big thing is like, well, are her and, Judy Garland's Esther Smith going to get together? And it's
do
like,
they,
well,
though?
We don't know at the end, because they're, like, together at the World's Fair, but we've never resolved those questions about, are they getting married? Is he going to college? Is he just getting a job to support them? Don't know, don't care. The end.
That's it.
And so, yeah, I agree. Big disservice just to kind of all of the characters, frankly, because it doesn't give her any more closure either.
Yeah. Well, one character that, I mean, definitely doesn't have enough to do, but gets one good moment in my mind. And this is where I feel like if they could have just tapped into this kind of comedic timing more, it's almost like a Sound of Music kind of a beat, you know what I mean, where they get the archetypes and the time period, but they just they utilize them correctly, or they upset them a little or something. It's that moment where Rose gets proposed to finally at the end. Like, I thought that was really fun.
That was a good moment.
And that's Warren Sheffield, I think is the character's name, the dude. Yeah. And he comes in at near the very end, where the father's like, listen, we're not going to New York. You don't, and the dad has a funny bit, right, where he says, like, you don't recognize St. Louis for how great it is, so that's why we're staying. He won't admit that he's wrong, which is a fun kind of, like, he can't even get rid of the pride for the moment. And while he's doing this, the suitor for Rose's character, he comes in and he's like, listen, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to get married immediately. And that's that. And then he just leaves. And that kind of like spark, that comedic spark is it's just like everything else just is so milquetoast and blah and predictable. And I wanted more of that,
Yeah. And if you just watch that last scene, starting with essentially the dad telling him we're not moving, and then Warren Sheffield coming in, and, like that's probably the best scene or sequence in the movie.
Yeah.
So don't be fooled. If you just watch that scene, that's the cream of the crop that this has to offer. And I agree with you. And, going back to our comments about mom and dad, I think that's a really good observation on your part. This movie feels off-center. The center of this movie is mom and dad, but they try to pin it on Esther. And it's like, no, no. The earth, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. It's the other way around.
That's right, yeah.
It just, it wastes its potential, I think, to be a much more interesting and just frankly better movie.
Yeah. All right, man, let's wrap it up and try to answer that final question. How do you feel about that?
Let's do it.
Let's get on the trolley. Okay, Justin, give the people a piece of thine mind.
Listen, O Israel. It's no, it won't be that grand. It's not It ain't worth your time, really. And that's not because you would rather the movie be really bad or really good, just like anything in life,
Yeah.
right? But if we're going to continue the biblical thing a little more, it's lukewarm. You kind of want to spit it out of your mouth. It's just not like, yeah, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, great song. The
Yeah.
mom and dad stuff, great. It doesn't justify putting yourself through 2 hours of a movie where little children talk about like being little demented demons. It's just not. It's not cool. So no, I would never rewatch this movie ever.
No.
Even if it was on TV, I would say no. I'm gonna go do cartwheels outside instead.
That would be a better use of your time.
And it's 2 hours of cartwheels versus this. Please, any day of the week. How about you?
Yeah, man. This is when it comes to musicals, my opinion is that there's basically like three basic categories. There's musicals with just utterly great stories, right? And normally those are supported by great music. Sometimes they really they do a lot to purposefully kind of eschew the poppy kind of trappings that Broadway brings, to the screen or to the stage. I'm thinking about like, Les Miserables and Sweeney Todd and Into the Woods. Like these are stories that are so much more focused on being compelling character portraits, and the music happens to be great as well. I think I almost named three Sondheim things, but one of those isn't. Then there's musicals with kind of scant stories. The story is fine, it's serviceable, but the sequences are epic. You know what I mean? And like for the art form that they are, musical theater, musical cinema, they just kind of like they earn some extra points because they make such great use of the form. This falls into the third category, which is just they're not my favorite kind of film. They're not my favorite kind of stage thing or film. They just kind of have no substance, and they don't have music that hits that hard either. You know what I mean? And other than, again, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, which would go on to be a single for a reason. It lasted because it's kind of the only thing from the movie that you can draw on to say like, wow, I can feel something from that. What, like the trolley song, and like even the titular tune for this movie has just some like nonsensical, we'll dance the hoochie coochie, you'll be my tootsie wootsy. Like that is the level of depth that is reached with the rest of this movie. So aside from a really couple of like slivers of light through what is an utterly, thick drape of cotton candy, I got nothing, and therefore I can't say that this is really worth your time. I would say you've probably gotten all you can from this movie already, from hearing whatever great version of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas around Christmas time. And other than that, I kind of want to seek out, what is Judy Garland's best screen, performance, and how can I absorb that and see, I've seen a clip from A Star Is Born starring her that makes me think like, oh man, that has something. So that is what it may be. If a movie makes you want to watch other movies and never that movie again, I gotta say no.
It's an indicator.
It's a hard pass. So that's what we got.
Well, dude, let's get on the trolley once more and put the dummy in the way and just burn the city to the ground and pull the wheels off the trolley and shove them down the throats of the old
of our
houses.
Enemies. Yes.
Yeah.
And then flower them in the face. All right, man. Well, that's only our second musical, and I would say like a very different experience from 42nd Street.
Quite.
Yeah. I look forward to more musicals because I can't think that they're all just like this. But next week we have a literary adaptation. It's a Dickens story. Great Expectations from 1946. That ought to be something, right?
Oh yeah, man. I think there's got to be more meat on the bone, and I'm excited for guests joining us then.
That's right, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.
Let the movie speak.
To the end of the line. With my
Hey, since you're still here and still listening, thank you, by the way. we'd like to ask an additional favor of you.
We have social media. It's a thing on the internet. And all you need to do is find us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and like and subscribe. I know this is annoying, but we have to ask you because we want more people to hear the show. In addition to that, if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, we would greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.